Hello everyone, welcome back to the second part of this Family Lines miniseries, and I don't even know how many times I've re-recorded this at this point, so let's get on with the show. Today, as you can see, we'll be drawing a younger version of our deeply loathed antagonist, Sam, with his family. This piece is actually a redraw of an older piece, which will be shown up on the screen, which served as the primary inspiration for beginning this miniseries. For this reason, this piece isn't too drastically different from the original, simply modified to match the current quality of the rest of the planned pieces. I should also disclaim, because I'm sure some of you have looked at how long this video is, I didn't intend for it to be this long. I struggled quite a bit with this piece, and especially in the term of facial structure, so you'll be seeing a lot of use of the lasso tool in the background. I'll be going over the backstory I have written out, and then some fun facts about Sam, including a lot of Vivit's early history, since he's the reason it spiraled out of control so badly. As with Ash, we have hints of his backstory within two videos, the Just a Fan PMV, and his siblings briefly appearing in the Ducker 8 PMV. Animatic. Sam is the youngest, as you may have guessed, by quite a significant margin, with his two older siblings, Julia and Antonio, only being 2 years apart from one another. This placed Sam as a perpetual outsider within his own family, worsened by the pressure of his parents. They had strict expectations for all three of the siblings, with fierce competition being encouraged. Julia was expected to act as a stand-in parent by virtue of being the eldest and the only daughter. Her serious, blunt attitude was criticized relentlessly against expectations of always smiling, taking in emotional labor in stride. Antonio, meanwhile, was expected to be the face of the trio as the older son, taking on a leadership role he had no interest in fulfilling due to his laid-back nature and rapidly growing distaste of the toxic mindset his family's immense wealth had produced. And as the youngest, Sam had the challenge of somehow standing out against the achievements of his older siblings, a seemingly impossible task. His failure to adopt any sort of social grace, no matter how hard he tried, became a great difficulty in his attempts to win the affection of his parents against his siblings. So instead, he retreated inward, throwing himself into his academic studies. If he couldn't win through boosting the family's image, he would do something so grand, so noteworthy, he couldn't be ignored. This led his attention to the growing robotics field of the 2040s and 50s, with a particular interest in the attempts to create what could truly be called a sentient android. He breezed through university, his studies fueling his research, and with family allowances at his disposal, he poured all that he could into his project, foregoing some of the luxuries he was used to growing up with in order to see it to fruition, all with the hopes that it would pay off in the long run. Consuming all the literature he could on the subject, he made frequent runs to the few bookstores that still existed nearby, a rarity in the time period. During one of his trips, he became close with another regular, an aspiring writer. She introduced herself as Rose, and the two talked more upon each visit. They became quick friends, bonding over a love of reading, and eventually finding similarities in their poor home lives. They began dating, and next thing you know, with Sam's encouragement, the two moved in together, eloping not long after. And with his work on his Android project near completion, things seemed to be looking up. But, of course, you know how this all ends. Going forward, Sam's relationship with his family turned from bad to worse. The entire nervous situation fueled a lot of his pre-existing paranoia, turning from simple anxiety to downright delusion. This led him to be even more sensitive to criticism than he already was, willing to cut off anyone who even suggested he may have some problems. His brother was the first to face the brunt of this, calling attention to the red flags present in the younger's parenting, a particular sore spot for Sam. His attempts at no contact with his parents and sister were less concrete, with repeated cycles of cutting them off and reconnecting, never staying for long and always leaving again at the first impulse. He'd gone past the point of feeling that there was something he needed to prove to his family. He knows he's correct, probably the only sane person left in a world that's clearly gone off the rails, and if others can't see that, then that's their problem, not his. The moments where he does choose to rebuild bridges are acts of charity in his eyes, something he's graciously allowing when he could so easily just not. As you may be able to tell by this lengthy description of his history, he has been one of the characters that I've had the most time to develop, being the third character I ever created for this series, third only after Amethyst and Vita. He was always intended to be a major antagonist, originally just a one-note android hater who was simply doing his job, not really a primary focus of the plot at all. He began to have more prominence as I interrogated his relationship with Vita, and then a very important plot hole came to mind. If he has a kid, where is his wife? Because it does not take only one person to make a kid. Whatever the answer to that question may be, I knew I couldn't fit this hypothetical wife into the plot. There was no room at this point, and it would greatly change many factors if she were to exist. So, naturally, I just decided she was already dead. First by terminal illness, because I have a love for the dramatic, then suicide, because I have a love for the dramatic, and then I finally landed on murder framed as suicide, because I have a love for the dramatic. Eventually, I became fascinated by the relationship between Sam and Rose. I mean, who wouldn't? And because Vivit was already becoming too large for the original visual novel I had planned, I decided to give the main story some breathing room. At the time, I was thinking maybe a webcomic or something, and decided instead the visual novel would be a prequel, featuring Sam and Rose. This eventually led to the creation of Nerva in turn, and with a player insert needed, Ash became that role. Basically, if I actually remembered to give my characters two parents, because this is not the first time this has happened, we wouldn't have Vivit Act 1. Sam's early prominence doesn't stop there, though, because he's actually featured in Vivit's first official animatic. The original Christmas Kids video is my oldest Vivit video on this channel, made even before any of my Ride the Cyclone animatics. I remember getting it done in a single night. Admittedly, I have no idea how I pulled that off, because I finished it at 2 a.m., which is also around the same time I ended up finishing my remake of the video, so maybe that just speaks for a bit of poor time management on my part. He's also featured in this channel's first Speedpaint, which is the original version of this piece I'm currently drawing. I know that by saying all this, it seems I have a favorite character here, and it's true. It's him. He's just so deeply fascinating to me and so disgustingly awful. I hate him so bad, and that's why I love writing for him. I mean, he's just such a disturbing guy with a mindset that's so disturbingly disconnected from reality. It's just so fun to explore how he manages to delude himself and others. Which leads to my favorite frame in one of my animatics. This frame of Duck or Ape, where Sam is being comforted by Julia and Antonio. The three of them have such a strained relationship that follows them into adulthood, especially Sam and Antonio, but they're willing to put aside their differences to comfort their little brother in his time of need. And it's a lie! It's a complete lie, and he feels so guilty for it, but it's not enough to actually tell them the truth. It's so subtly diabolical, and yet Sam just manages to display himself as so pitiful. You can't help but feel bad for him, even though you know it's completely his own fault. I mean, that's really the core of his character. There's just this overwhelming victim mentality, both unconscious and purposely played up. He wants other people to feel bad for him, just as much as he actually believes that he's someone that should be pitied because of all the so-called adversity he's faced. He genuinely believes the world is against him, but believes in his own self-importance to feel he's owed sympathy for that fact. It's this self-loathing and intense ego at the same time. It's just... I think if I keep talking, I'll accidentally run myself into some spoiler territory. So, for the sake of, not spoiling all of Act 2, I'll have to cut things off here. But thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that I could shed some light on, seriously, one of my favorite characters to write for, probably out of every story I've ever made. If you'd like to see more of Vivit, please be sure to check out the playlist on my channel page. And with that being said, enjoy the rest of the Speedpaint.